Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Jackson Wild Action Coalition, Reimagining an Inclusive Natural History Film Industry, sponsored by HHMI Tanglebank Studios. We are so grateful for your participation, everyone. This is an incredible subject, and as a board member for Jackson Wild, I'm so glad that we're having the opportunity to have an open discussion about this very important topic. First, I want a table set. This town hall is about positive intent. Thank you, my email bell there, and positive contribution. This is a moment to share experiences, thoughts, and guidelines so that our community can continue to grow. I want to acknowledge that many networks and production companies are still working on their internal guidelines. So to those who can join today, it's really, really appreciated. This is a starting point, everyone. Please share your knowledge and contribute positively. We will have a 1 hour sharing, and then we will break into smaller groups so that the conversation can continue. With that, I turn it over to Pam Aguilar from PBS and Rocky Collins, who is our town hall moderator. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So happy to see all your faces. I just was scrolling through all the participants, and it's incredible to see you. Really appreciate you joining this conversation in this moment in time that we are all experiencing globally. Nothing excites me more than the ability and opportunity to talk about how we can work together better and how we can make a bigger impact across the media landscape that we all know and love so well. So want to kick it off. As you've seen in the previous slide, there's a lot of speakers on, here in this town hall. So I want to make sure that we get through everyone. Quickly though, just a little context. We have been getting together as a diversity, equity, and inclusion coalition. There's been a small group of us, and then it extended broadly to a few others who are also here with us today. First of all, want to thank those of you that have been in the coalition. So Janet to begin, also Rocky Collins, who is here with us from Vulcan. Tom Shanatsky with Doc Lights was part of the conversation. Jarrett Lipworth with HHMI Tanglebank Studios. And we really, just came together, brainstormed, and started a white paper, right? A Google Sheet document that is also going to be attached later in the conversation here, that is going to be opened up to your input and really continue to grow as we continue this conversation. But now I want to pass it over to Rocky, who is going to talk a little bit about the discussions that we've had so far. Rocky?
Thanks, Pam. I'm just going to start off with a big hat tip to Lisa Sanford and Melanie and Christy, the entire team, because I think we've all watched over the last few years as Jackson has become more and more inclusive, more and more women filmmakers invited, special panels for people from around the world. It's just because it's really the vibe at Jackson has become more and more, I think, fun and inclusive and just a lot of possibilities. And I think that they've taken advantage of this horrible pandemic where none of us can meet virtually, but they've turned it into an advantage by inviting people from all over the world and inviting more and more people. One of the things they did when they set up this action coalition is they reached out to 20, 30 different organizations around the country that are schools and organizations by and for filmmakers of color and different interest groups, everybody pulling in the same direction, and put out a lot of free tickets, invited a lot of people. So I hope some of you are here virtually. We, as Pam said, we got together to talk about what we can do in the film in the specifically U.S. and Northern European film industry to help invite more people into the tent, into our little corner of the business. And I think that it's important to talk about why but we very quickly, like, why diversify? And we very quickly came up with the realization, there's 10 reasons, at least 20, 30 different reasons why diversity in the filmmaking community is good for society, good for the product, good for everybody. So we kind of moved past that. And even though if your reasons for wanting to diversify your business are a little different than somebody else's, we all want to know how. And that's really what we decided to focus on, is how there's so many film companies and broadcasters that we know are trying to invite more filmmakers of different varieties and nationalities and points of view into the community. But how do we do it? How do we connect? So that's kind of where we started. We're going to share a lot of resources, things that we put together, people that we've reached out to, but also, we're standing on the shoulders of lots of other people who've been working on this for years. So we're going to try to connect you to other organizations about best practices, just crew lists, things like that. I want to special thanks to the Documentary Producers Alliance. They've done some great work in the last year or so, and I know some of them are here. And but this is not we're not here to present a finished product. This is a work in progress, and this is a conversation starter. So that's why there's a lot of speakers here. So I'm going to get off the stage and let other people talk. And so Pam, I think back to you, because I think you're going to introduce the first people. And
Yeah.
thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rocky, for that. So as you can tell, the conversations have been starting, but I do want to reiterate that this is really the time for ideas and the time for us to really come together and talk about these issues and continue moving forward. So really, it's all about positivity and growing this tent, right? I want to turn it over to Jordan. But before that, just to let you know that the next few speakers are really industry leaders, right? Folks at different networks that are going to share with us how they're really approaching this issue and what they're doing and their thinking to move it forward. And again, just also want to reiterate that a lot of networks, production companies don't have everything hammered out yet. And this is obviously a work in progress. So nothing is final here, and it is just a next step. So Jordan, you want to take it away?
Awesome. Thanks, Pam. And thank you to everyone who joined our virtual campfire here today, and to my fellow colleagues championing this most important work that you're going to hear from. My name is Jordan Banks, and I am the HRBP and D&I Project Manager, long title, at National Geographic Partners. I've been with National Geographic for about 7 years and supported kind of every part of our business and our products that we have. But more recently, I assumed this role of D&I project manager to keep kind of all these trains on their track, to make sure that we have all the necessary people and resources to keep those trains moving forward, which is why I'm so thankful and excited to be here today to share some of the things that we have in operation. So at National Geographic, our yellow border has always been a portal to the world. It showcases all of the wonder and the beauty that it has to offer. But we know that the story of our amazing planet and the people in it simply has just not been complete when everyone's voice is not included. So in the past several months, our company and our team members have really rallied around this battle cry, and we've begun to make the necessary changes to support a more inclusive environment internally. It starts at home, but also externally, in the stories that we tell and how we tell them and who is telling them. So the first thing that we did was we formed a D&I council, which is a diversity and inclusion council. It's led by our fearless and wonderful Karen Greenfield, who is the SVP of Business Operations. And this council consists of employees of all levels across National Geographic Partners, from BERG leaders. Our BERGs we have a lot of acronyms, but our BERGs are business employee resource groups, to senior executives who are really passionate and driven around this work. Within that council are 4 different task forces that we've allotted, or kind of these sub-action teams that focus on areas of career, content, culture, and community. And these task forces have been doing a lot of work. I can't emphasize that in the last couple of months. I wish I had all day to share the list of projects and initiatives we're working on and to hear your feedback, but just to kind of plug a little bit of what we're doing. We kind of have this overarching theme of furthering our brand presence in the content community and in our community, specifically in the DMV or the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia area. But around the community and our audiences, we want National Geographic to be a place to consume and create content in an inclusive and diverse environment, and of course, doing it in an inclusive and diverse way. So for our content, what does that mean? It means getting the talent both in front of and behind the camera that tell these stories in accurate, sensitive, and impactful ways. And then when we further our brand presence in our wider community, we're energizing efforts around community outreach. So that community task force I mentioned earlier is tasked with this work. And we're also looking, our kind of big lift that we're looking at doing in the new year is working on hosting a virtual open house for community members, local schools, HBCUs, and organizations to showcase and kind of invite in this collaboration and knowledge to the work that we're doing at National Geographic. And then internally, we're focusing a lot of our efforts on the elements of our employees' journey at National Geographic. So our career task force is especially primed to do this. So they're looking at things like best hiring practices. And I know that's a very broad term, but when we think about it, one of the examples we use is kind of job descriptions. So what language in job descriptions are turning away candidates or aren't actually inclusive? It's unpacking, is what we're saying, is that language actually necessary to have in the job description, or could we say the same thing in a different, more inclusive and diverse way? And then of course, looking at growth opportunities and retention for our current staff. So soon we'll be rolling out a robust sponsorship and mentorship program with our parent company, Disney, to help elevate these voices that we don't hear from as often as we know that we should. Our culture task force, in partnership with our Bergs, has been working towards creating these safe spaces for our employees to share in the experiences of their own identities and cultures. And we've called these Brave Conversations. We had our first one back in June with our Noir Berg, with Employee Resource Berg. And since then, our other Bergs have kind of joined in. More recently, we have a newly formed Berg called Enabled, which is an employee resource group for those with visible and invisible disabilities, neurodiversity, caretakers, and allies. And they began this really, really powerful event called My Journey, where a member of the team is sharing kind of their journey in this space. We did one, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where a member of our team shared their journey about their journey with ADHD, which was, again, so powerful and informative and is open for all staff to attend and hear. And then the last thing that I want to plug, and is my own personal favorite because we've been really, really working to lift this effort, is that we heard loud and clear that that there's a thirst for more learning and training opportunities around inclusion. Inclusion, as we all know, is kind of this hot button, hot topic word. And so what does inclusion actually mean? What does it actually feel like? And how can we do it? How can I do it for my peers? How can I do it for, if I'm a leader, how can I do it for my team members? So National Geographic, as we all know, is a place that consumers come to be educated. It's where explorers like many of you come to share your learnings with the world. And we felt that we were doing a little bit of a disservice to our staff that we weren't also providing kind of that education. And so just this last week, we rolled out something called unconscious bias courses, which, as we all know, unconscious bias isn't something we just solve in one training. And so this series is a series of courses that's focused on our own awareness, unpacking our own awareness. And then it's interactive learnings on topics like microaggressions, leading inclusively, and selecting talent. So as I mentioned, I want to give the floor to, again, all the other kind of speakers that are here today to share, but this is only a taste of the work that our teams are doing, and we are so excited about this work, but we also know that we have a ways to go. But just to plug our D&I statement, we know that we can only go further together. Thanks, Pam.
I love that. Thank you for that. You guys are doing some incredible work, and I'd love to touch base with you offline to talk a little bit more of that. So many things. My favorite is the Brave Conversations. because I think that oftentimes we don't acknowledge that these conversations can be difficult, and we're all coming to them from different experiences, different backgrounds, and people don't, with the best intentions, don't want to say the wrong things. And so sometimes I think that the conversations get stagnated. And so perfect name, Brave Conversations, for that. So let's follow up with that later, Jordan. I want to go next to Nancy Robinson from the Academy, because unfortunately she has a hard out in about 7 minutes. So I want to be respectful of that. So take it away, Nancy. Let us know what you guys are doing in this space.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am with the Television Academy Foundation, and our vision statement is to harness the power of television to transform lives and careers, increase diversity in the field, and to promote positive social change. And the foundation has always been about creating opportunities for students who don't have access to the industry. And for close to a decade, we've made a concerted effort at expanding access and opportunities for students from historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, Asian Pacific Islander institutions, and other predominantly underrepresented academic institutions. And about 3 years ago, we really leaned into diversity and inclusion by engaging in a broad assessment of organizational goals and program impact. Our focus centered on the increasing recruitment of talent from underserved communities, both local to LA and in other regions of the country, and expanding the educational offerings associated with key programs with an eye towards greater professional development support and essential skills training. So in those 3 years, we've seen an evolution of our education programs and inspired the launch of new internship opportunities that focus on increasing access to the industry, particularly for Californians who are from low-income families and communities of color. We developed a partnership with the California State University Entertainment Alliance, an initiative that aims to provide a competitive edge to CSU students entering the entertainment industry by removing some of the financial and structural roadblocks encountered while trying to get your foot in the door. And according to the CSU Chancellor's 2019 report, more than 1/3 of CSU students are first-generation college students. 54% of CSU undergrads receive Pell Grants, and more than half of CSU students are students of color. So with several of our initiatives, one being the Foundation's Foster Forward initiative, we provide opportunities for transition age and former foster youth interested in exploring careers in entertainment. And most recently, the foundation has partnered directly with CBS and the production company Secret Hideout to launch a singular opportunity, which is called the Star Trek Command Training Program, which champions the values shared by the foundation and the franchise, including inclusivity, diversity, education, and access, with particular consideration given to students from low-income backgrounds. So it's our Television Academy members that are responsible for selecting the finalists for our internship programs, with the hosting company selecting the intern. And this past summer, obviously with COVID restrictions, we were not able to have a full internship program, but we were still able to serve 50 college students from across the country by providing 12 remote internships and 38 fellowships. And our fellowships consisted of professional development once a week for 8 weeks and virtual one-on-one flash mentorships with our Television Academy members and other industry professionals in their chosen field. And I'm very happy to say that this year in 2020, 78% of our participating class were female and 74% were people of color. So we are really excited about all the work that we're doing to provide opportunities and provide a pipeline for these underrepresented students across the country. And we're hoping that we can continue and broaden our reach in the upcoming years.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Nancy, for sharing. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Appreciate you. No, it's a little earlier in LA. Not so bad now. But I love the Foster Forward program. I mean, how incredible, because for those of you, I'm not sure how foster programs work around the world, but certainly in the US, it is a quite underserved population. So that's very near and dear to my heart. So I'd love to learn more about that later on. So thanks, Nancy. We'll turn it over to Alex Solier, who comes to us from Bon Pioche. You want to share a little bit with us, Alex, what you guys are doing across the pond?
Yeah, hello everyone. Hope everyone is well and safe. I'm Alex Solier. I'm a partner producer.
Can you hear us? You've frozen a little bit.
We are quite entrepreneur, and we are to listen to the voice, and especially the voice of the society for sure, but also the one from our staff. And a few months ago, yeah, a voice started to raise, and we decided to move forward about this to create a tool. So we decided to create a gender charter of good practice for our first of all, for all our staff. We define and rewrite a charter of good practice in regards to the full equality between female and male, in regards to different attitude, job, and practice in the first. We like to make a sign to everyone who will have to work with us, meaning that of common sense, obvious, super logic, but we think that it's sometimes, and especially at this time of the age, to remember a few things of good behaviors, and we decide to practice and to share this with everyone from external who are going to work with us in our production, which is quite unique in France and which is good. Yeah, the European Producer Club decided to get it and start to use this gender charter now for them and all the membership. So at least, for example, we compensate all those in an equivalent role in mission, skill, equally, whatever the gender of the employees for sure. And we evaluate now at least one candidate of each gender for each internal job we are opening. So once again, I would say it's the young generation will start this, which is good. And we of course decide to move forward now with diversity and everything, but it's a key topic now in France, like everywhere else for sure.
Awesome. I mean, I love the fact that you guys are doing so much work in this gender equality space, because oftentimes I think when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we forget the fact that there's still so much work to do within the gender space, right? And so kudos to you. And I just want to point out to everyone that Melanie has just shared your charter for good practices here on our chat. So everyone be sure to take a look at that when you have a moment. It's very, very cool.
And also the fact to make it official, because now they are connected to the contract that we sign with everyone. It's a real involvement. So
absolutely.
Hopefully it will change a lot of things now.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to take a look at that when we're wrapped up here. Thanks so much, Alex. Appreciate you sharing.
You're welcome.
And then I'll just jump in here as someone that works at PBS. I've been at PBS for about 6 years. And within those 6 years that I've been at PBS, we have really, really been working hard to make strides within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And every year it's incremental, right? It might not be something that you see overnight, and it has not been overnight, but more and more we have been working with more people of color, LGBTQ+, persons with different abilities, behind the scenes, in front of the camera. We have more presenters, so more representative, and certainly the gender equity part has been part of our conversations. In the interest of time, I won't go into a lot of the initiatives that we have cooking on our end, but I'll share that similarly, as Jordan said, we have a task force or a committee, a diversity, inclusion, equity committee that is meeting constantly. We had been meeting before. There was a new one that was created certainly after the events, after George Floyd's murder and everything that happened, and it's become more robust. And there's been a bigger focal point to this issue, which is exciting because it has allowed us to not only look inward at anything from hiring practices to the way that we crew up productions and the way that we speak to producers and how they're telling their stories that are coming to us from all over the world, but it's also given us an opportunity to really talk amongst ourselves across the PBS system. For some of those of you that don't know, PBS is comprised of about 350 or so local member stations across the country who really operate independently and pay us a membership to be part of the system, by which then we provide services like a programming schedule, amongst other things across education and marketing, everything else. But two of the ones that you might be most familiar with are Nova, that come to us from GBH in Boston, and Nature, which comes to us from WNET in New York. Two huge partners for us that we are in more conversations with. They're starting some incredible initiatives across the board to really push the diversity and inclusion aspects of what we're doing forward. And then two other parts of really the PBS system that are very important, that aren't part of stations, but are POV, which is from American Documentary, is an organization, nonprofit organization, an Independent Lens that comes to us from ITVS. Both of those are really the partners that we have internally as a system that bring us a lot of diverse voices, independent documentaries, and certainly within the environmental space, especially, is an opportunity for a lot of makers to tap into those organizations that then partner with us to bring us content. And they have really been across the board for many years, but now even more so doubled down on bringing inclusive and diverse voices in front of the camera, behind the camera. So really exciting work happening at PBS. And as we move on after this presentation to the fireside chats, I'm happy to dive in a little further if you all have questions on those, or we can certainly touch base on offline to keep those discussions going. But for now, I want to move on, and we have some new faces that have joined us here. Really want to hear from other people that have lended their time to this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, there's been other contributors in addition to the folks that you met early on. And when I call on you guys, we have Carolina and Dan here. If you can briefly introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing. So Carolina, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline, or Carolina. I come from Uruguay, a tiny country in South America. I'm a documentary filmmaker and I have a production company in the US, but I also run a company in Uruguay that we adapt audiovisual content for blind and deaf people. So we use audio description in order for a person that has visual impairments to enjoy it. And we also use special subtitles that are not closed captions because it's more detailed. And we also use sign language interpretation for people that have hearing disabilities. So we work with institutions and with producers here in Uruguay, Argentina, Mexico, Peru, but we never adapt nature and wildlife content. It never comes to us. It's mostly narrative films and corporate videos. So the problem is that the majority of executives at distribution companies and theaters, TV channels are not very concerned about adapting their content for these people, because it's not strange to believe that there are not enough blind and deaf people to build an audience. But I will say that this is actually not true, because adapting the content not only benefits people that have this type of disabilities, but it also, for example, benefits the elderly. You may not know somebody that is blind or deaf in your social environment, but you probably know somebody that uses those Coke bottle glasses or hearing loops. And for me, at least, having access to education and entertainment culture, especially scientific research and educational content, it's key for the development of a citizen in society. But the problem is that most producers are not even aware of this. They don't know about it. And I mean, obviously, because it's not common at all. So obviously they're not going to include the adaptation of their content on their budgets. But on the right side is that there are countries that are doing very good job on this. I will say that England and the UK, it's like the leading country for this. They even have movies that are premiere on the theaters that are adapted for blind and deaf people. I also know that the US and Spain, for example, are also doing a very good job, but still around the world, that's massive work that we need to do to make it better. And I will say also that, my invitation right now would be that you guys will experience an adaptation. Perhaps you can just watch an audio description or hear the audio description, close your eyes and put yourself on the blind person's shoes and try to understand how they see the story. Also, take out the sound of your own work and try to see if you understand it without the sound. The more you experience it, the more you're going to be aware of it, and the easiest it will come to you as something that you may be able to incorporate on your own work. So fortunately, there are some adaptations available for you guys. If you guys have Netflix, you can go ahead and watch, for example, the audio description, listen in this case, the audio descriptions of shows and of movies. For example, you have the movie Chasing Corals. You also have The Dancing of the Birds, Challenger, which is the one that's new now. They don't have sign language interpretation because that's like the hardest thing to include in the adaptation because it's the most expensive one. But they might include some special subtitles that are not closed captions. And if you don't find it easily on your own, you can always email me and I would be happy to send you a sample of how it looks and a whole adaptation of this content. And if you are welcome, I'm welcome to hear any, I'm happy to talk about this anytime. I can leave my email on the chat if you're interested to know more about this.
Carolina, that's fascinating. Carolina and I had an opportunity to chat briefly last night, and I do recommend that you follow up with her either at the fireside following this conversation or separately, because her work is extremely interesting and important and really enlightening, and particularly in the space of natural history, science, and environmental work. I think that we have a lot of work to do, and the more of us that partner with Carolina, I think the better our industry will be. So thanks again, Carolina, for that. Oh, and her email just popped up. Melanie's like the magic the magic maker. We say something and it pops up on the side. So thanks, Melanie, for that and for being there. Dan, we're going over to you. Dan O'Neill is an independent filmmaker and presenter. You want to talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing on your end?
Yeah, hi. So yeah, my name's Dan O'Neill, independent filmmaker, and I run a wildlife film festival in the UK called Wilderland, which tours independent films from diverse filmmakers all over the world around to the British public. But I also work in development for television. Actually, most recently, one of the things I was working on was as a show for the deaf and hard of hearing wildlife series called Visitors to My Garden, and we were trying to develop a way to get wildlife content out there for the deaf community in the UK. But I recently did so actually that would be great to connect with you about that as well. Yes, so recently I was in conversation with Lauren Esposito about being a member of the queer community, the LGBTQI community in wildlife filmmaking, because we had this conversation, and also in science, because there isn't actually that many people in the position that Lauren's definitely in from her perspective, and she'll talk about that. But from a presenting perspective, when I was growing up as a young kid, there was really no one on television that was openly gay or openly part of the queer community in any capacity. Doing adventurous things on television or going and doing wildlife presenting expeditions. And so we had an open conversation about that and the experiences that we had and how much that would be would have changed when we were young, and how important that would have been for us. And I think how important that is moving forward, getting those diverse voices from the queer community out on television in production. Because there is always an element of, well, there has always in previous times been an element of tokenizing with gay people. You'll get very overt stereotypes, but actually there's a massive diversity within the gay community, people who might not present in certain ways. And I think that's so important to be represented so that it gives people a voice as well. So that was our conversation. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. So important to highlight the fact that part of the moving forward, right, is to represent all of us, every single one of us, in represent our whole selves and in our true state, and not the tropes that have been perpetuated on and on. So I appreciate you flagging that and bringing that as part of the conversation. So now we're going to move on to Faith. Faith, it's good to see you again. Fortunately, not live and in person on a stage as we did last year. But yeah, Faith has been a fellow and been a part of the Jackson Wild family for a while now. Do you want to share with us a little bit about what you've been doing and what your experience has been like?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So last year I had the incredible privilege of attending the Jackson Wild Summit. I'm currently actually in the Masai Mara in Kenya. I'm Kenyan. And I was able to go from Kenya all the way to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, through the support of Vulcan Productions and Jackson Wild. And it was just incredible that I was able to be in a space with people who usually come to Kenya to film content. And I was able to get an interview with WildStar Productions, which is WildStar Film, which is based in the United Kingdom, and they're working on an incredible series for Nat Geo called Queens, which is about female-led animal societies. And that's just an opportunity I just would have never had to be a part of if I hadn't gone to Jackson Wild. But ever since I came back and all the conversations that we had in Wyoming, I just felt this sense of responsibility, that I've been to Jackson Hole, I've had this experience. And I just kept thinking, how do I bring that experience back to Kenya and make whatever I was able to get accessible to other people? Because the reality is not everyone will be able to have the opportunity to go to Jackson Wild. So another fellow from last year, her name's Fiona, came up with this idea of doing the Kenyan chapter of the Jackson Wild Summit. And so we've put that on. It's actually going on right now. But we're meeting in person. So what that looks like is we've got 12 filmmakers who have a passion for wildlife filmmaking, but have never had the opportunity to go into the parks to film because of various barriers. And we've got an amazing lineup of mentors that we reached out to in our networks. So we've scheduled different mentors who are covering everything from producing, cinematography, editing, photography. And so that's been happening during the day. In the morning, they go into the park to film, and in the afternoon. And then in between, they have the sessions. And then in the evening, we stream the on-demand programming from Jackson Wild. And it's just, we've been so overwhelmed with support. We got support from HHMI, Tangled Bank, to get equipment, because that's one of the barriers. I mean, people don't have equipment, so we're hiring equipment through their support. And yeah, so that's what I've been working on. And while we're here, we're also trying to charge these filmmakers that this is just a launch pad. Like, you go out and you keep doing what you've been doing, but also using that agency to bring more people on board and thinking of more ideas of growing the capacity. Because it's great to have the foundational stuff, but I feel like the real question is, how do we grow this in a way that's symbiotic for everyone? Because we don't want it to be purely Kenyans who are making wildlife films in Kenya. We still want it to be the way it was, but now we want some room at the table. So that's what I've been working on.
Thank you, Faith. I love finishing up with room at the table, because I am a proponent of the fact that we're in such an exciting time to be in this space. There's so many opportunities for content, and there absolutely is room at the table. And so I certainly don't see inclusivity and diversity and bringing more people to these talks and conversations and projects and everything else that we do as a hindrance or as something that is taking away from somebody else. I think the more we're able to build that and really convey that, the more doors will continue to open up, because certainly and I'm probably speaking to the choir here, but the more diverse perspectives and voices, the better our stories will be and the stronger our industry is going to be as a whole. So Faith, I commend you and Fiona for doing this, and it sounds amazing. I'd love to hear more about it. So we'll offline on that later on, but thanks so much. I want to turn it over now to Rosh Patel, who has been very busy, and I'll let him talk to you about it, with a baby panda. But beyond that, he does do other work. So Rosh, take it away.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So my name is Reshaping. I'm the media producer at Smithsonian's National Zoo and the Conservation Biology Institute. So that, covering everything from the baby panda that we just had about a month ago to a lot of our field work. We just reintroduced swift foxes into Montana, onto an Indian reservation over there. And so it's been, a really exciting time to be a part of the Smithsonian, because in part we're from a film standpoint. And one of the things we've been doing is, as many people have echoed, is trying to look and hire locally. We're working in countries it doesn't make sense for me to go all the time, and it can feel like a risk at times, but as everyone has said, the is better at the end. It's going to be more meaningful to know that local filmmakers are involved, filming in a way that's going to resonate with audience that we think really impacted by the conservation work. So that's been a really exciting thing that we've been doing, and that has entirely well been no hiccups in trying to do it. It just takes a little bit of vet, and the same as you would with anybody. So experience. And to what Carolina was talking about earlier too, we physically have the National Zoo, which has been really great to start factoring in accessibility into the way that we produce content. So, we did a coral story a couple years ago, and we're renovating our coral exhibit to have touch exhibits and quiet for those who get anxious around lots of people. So there's a lot of ways to tell the story about coral, about what they mean, what they look like, why they're important. So from an organizational standpoint, it's actually really exciting to start to see more opportunities and funding to help make that happen. The ideas are not new, but I think the ears that are listening are, which is something we're certainly hoping to take advantage of. And as it relates to this conversation, one of the things that I was hoping to contribute to this conversation and this little group is also thinking about accessibility, as Faith had mentioned, to the festival itself. It can cost anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000 to $7,000, depending on where you're coming from, to regularly attend the festival. And that is well worth it if you're able to come. It is a centerpiece and the heart of an industry. But going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming is not the most accessible if you aren't part of the outdoor and wild community, which in many cases has its own diversity and inclusion issues as it is formalized. So there's a lot of exciting things that have happened as a result of everyone being locked in homes to figure out working and connecting. So I held a panel with Sally Snow, and we talked about some of the barriers with working in Asia, and some of the things that we're going to be talking about and hopefully solving for are things that, again, are in place. It's just more standard practice for the industry, so that everyone can be a
such a good note. Thank you, Rosh, for that. We're running out of time, but I do want to give Ashley and Iva, who are our last two contributors, some time to come on board.
Wow. Okay, Melanie, for the win.
So yeah, unfortunately, if Ashley and Iva, if you guys can trim down your presentations just a little bit so that we can have time for both of you, that would be great. But Ashley, take it away.
I'll take it away. So, hi everyone. I have a background in animal science and biology. I recently completed a master's program at the University of California in Santa Cruz in science writing. So I now get to speak with scientists all around the world and communicate their work to all different types of audiences, from the written word to podcasts and more recently films and short science stories. I just love the job that I'm in right now, and got involved with the Jackson Wild Festival recently. And in a conversation that we had recently, right, Pam, you were involved, as well as a handful of other speakers that have spoken today, we started talking about how the Jackson Wild Festival can actually enhance its diversity and engage with new audiences. And one of the ideas that I proposed that I wanted to share with everyone today was to actually let what Jackson Wild does best lead the conversation, and that is to showcase the amazing films that are submitted to the festival year over year. And so when I think about how to really approach, new students, new filmmakers around the world, let's do a virtual screening of a really cool film that's relevant to that particular audience. And even better, let's bring in one of the writers or directors or producers of that film to host the Q&A session and engage with that audience. And then let's follow up with additional ways that those audiences can stay involved and take advantage of some of the amazing opportunities that Jackson Wild has to present.
I love that idea. And I think now in this virtual world, that is so much easier to do. So we'll work on making that happen. Iva Moss, do you want to take it away for us?
Yes. Waka he dos ni ake na ne sit na he si nani be babata na but be half the teeth and that Nita Aina Bita Awu, what I said was, welcome, hello, my name is Iva Moss Redman, and I respect and love to all my relatives of the world. I'd like to tell you about a program that I'm part of, and it's looking for partners. The program is called IKEEP, the Indigenous Knowledge for Effective Education. Our goal is to prepare, certify, and support the placement and retention of culturally responsive Native American educators in schools with the high populations of Native American youth, targeting placement in school districts that are within the Northwest. The uniqueness of this program is that it includes many tribes as partners and tribal citizens as students and the mentors. I served in this program as a mentor for the pre-service teachers. Currently, 5 students are on track to becoming teachers. 3 of the students have their classrooms this year. The other 2 are working on certification. The current cohort of the IKEEP students are still enrolled in the classes and are getting ready for their practicum. Students in the program represent the following tribes: Shoban, the Shoshone-Bannock, the Shoshone-Paiute, the Nez Perce, the Spokane, the Colville, Assiniboine, Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, Yakima, Salish, Kootenai, and because I'm in there now, so it represents the Northern Arapaho in Wyoming. Last year, I was nominated as the National Teacher of the Year in Washington, D.C. at the National Johnson O'Malley Association Conference, and I taught for 15 years, and that experience and the award would not have been available to me if I did not graduate from an American Indian Teacher Training Program from the University of Utah. These programs help Indigenous members work towards a teaching degree so we can return to our communities to help our youth. In my teaching, I have been able to bring the world to my students. We have gone skiing and camping here in Jackson Hole, and that was with the help with Jackson Wild and Coombs Foundation. We were able to visit other tribes in Oklahoma with other tribal youth, so they got to experience, off the reservation. We have visited the Yellowstone State Park with the tribal youth from Montana and South Dakota and learned about the science and the tribal stories of the area. So the Crow from Montana came in and told about their territories in the Yellowstone, and so we learned a lot of history from them. All of these experience and memories with my students were made because I was selected as a teacher candidate in a teacher program. These programs are so important for the youth, and I have seen my students receive full scholarships to Dartmouth, South Dakota School of Mines, and local community colleges. These programs matter for each of these tribal communities. The current funding for the IKEEP program will be ending, and the university is looking for partners to continue the program. Tomorrow, the universities will make available a crowdfunding link So as soon as that becomes available, I'll share it to Mel, and then she can add it to our links. But what we're looking for is to keep continuing to have Indian educators enter into the programming. And this last week we did digital storytelling programming. So we're starting to teach them how to tell the stories. And it started with a digital, Jackson Wild said that they would come in and help this spring and maybe do a storytelling
That's
session.
fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We can go and talk a little bit more during the fireside chat. I wanted to give Dr. Lauren Esposito the last couple of minutes that we have, so you can talk to us a little bit about the work.
And I do just want to mention real quick, we're okay to go over this time.
Okay.
As long as you can hang out, Pam, we're okay to go over. So I want to give everyone their time to speak.
All right, great. So Lauren, do you want to tell us about the work that you guys have been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lauren Esposito. I'm queer and I'm a biodiversity scientist, not a filmmaker. And though I really didn't realize it, for most of my life and the majority of my career, I saw no real footsteps to follow in. When I was hired into what's my dream job that I hold now at the California Academy of Sciences as the curator of arachnology, I kind of had an epiphany. I realized that I had never been taught by or shared a lab with another queer student or scientist since I began my undergraduate training, all the way up until the present. And when I started my position, I'm the first openly queer research scientist in the 150-year history of my institution, which is in the gayest city in America. And I realized that if I was feeling this way, having done my education on the East Coast of the US in New York City and in the West Coast of the US and the greater Bay Area, that certainly there's other people out there in the world that are feeling the same way. And so that led me to do something about it. And I formed a visibility campaign called 500 Queer Scientists, which is a visibility campaign for LGBTQAI+ people working and studying in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and supporting careers like science policy and education. And it's a space for them to really announce two parts of their life as a queer scientist and their life as a scientist. So really bringing those two aspects, their queer identity or their non-gender conforming identity and their identity as somebody working in STEM together into the same room, which is oftentimes something that we're led to believe have to be separated. And it really wasn't until I found myself as a working professional scientist that I realized that for most of my life, I had been leaving my queer identity at the door when I walked into the lab. And that's really problematic for a few reasons. And I'd like to introduce everyone to called the diversity innovation paradox. And I've heard a lot of people say that having visibility and presence of diverse voices is really important for having a better story. And I couldn't agree more. And neither could this idea of the diversity innovation paradox, which if just having a better story isn't enough motivation for you, we're all in search of the next new big thing. Like whether we're working in wildlife filmmaking or working in science, having the next new big thing is exciting. It moves our fields forward, and really more than anything, it makes us excel. Like as a production company or as a lab or as an institution, it makes us the best of the best, the top of our game. And that diversity innovation paradox basically says that if you are a contributor from a historically underrepresented group in your field, you're more likely to make fundamental shifts in that field, to make the big new discovery, the next new idea, and really push that field forward to the forefront of innovation. But as an individual, if you're from a historically underrepresented group, you're less likely to be recognized for your contribution. So while you're more likely to move the field forward, you're less likely to be recognized for having moved the field forward. And that's really problematic, both for representation and recognition of contributions, but also for the field as a whole. And I think fundamentally at the end of the day, for many spaces, including both natural history science and natural history filmmaking, there needs to be a paradigm shift in how we recognize and celebrate diversity. And the last thing I'd just like to mention is that I think that this becomes particularly important in the case of intersectional identities. And intersectional identities are those in which people in particular have more than one historically underrepresented aspect to the way that they present themselves. So that could be that you're a brown woman or a Black person that identifies as queer or non-binary. And so when you have these intersectional identities, not only do you have a greater diversity of perspectives to contribute, making the probability that you make major shifts in your field greater, but it also means that you face a greater set of challenges or impediments to success. And so I think that it's really important not only to be aware of underrepresented people at face value, but also under the challenges that people of intersectional identities are facing in being successful and really being pioneers in their field. And we have to figure out how to celebrate that success moving forward. And I just wanted to share that through 500 Queer Scientists, we've now gathered over 1,300 individual stories of people working in STEM, sharing their successes, both as a STEM professional, but also LGBTQ AI plus identifying person. And that's a searchable database. So if you're looking for resources for experts or for on-camera talent, you can search this database. I think the link was dropped in the chat. And any of those folks as brave enough to be out and public facing with their identities are more than willing to be contacted. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. And you're right, that sort of intersectionality is one that we don't talk about often. Emma Tyrell, I believe, pardon if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, also mentioned not to forget age. I'm glad that that was brought up because that was certainly part of the conversation that we've been having in the coalition. It was mentioned there, and oftentimes we don't talk about that enough, but it is also another aspect of this discussion that I'm glad was signaled, Emma. So thank you for that, because it very much should be part of the broader conversation. And I also wanted to point out that there was an email. I want to make sure. Yeah, Iva Moss's email has been put up in the chat as well. So anybody that wants to follow up with regards to the work that she's doing with the different tribes and the students, I think it's remarkable that that all of this effort is going in and that they're being able to have all of these experiences and really bring their experience to this type of storytelling as well. So thanks again, Iva, for that. Want to kick it over. I see Ian here. Don't see you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Okay, there you are. Do you want to go ahead and share with us?
Yeah, this is better anyway. You don't want to see me in my current state anyway. We'll just leave it at the headshot.
Okay.
And hopefully it won't kick me out.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm here on behalf of the Documentary Producers Alliance, and we are a collective of documentary producers that sort of advocate on behalf of the industry, documentary industry, from the perspective of the producers. And in that organization, I'm the chair of the Inclusion and Structural Equality Committee, which is why I first connected with the summit here. And we look at our work, and this work particularly in terms of inclusion and addressing some of the structural issues we're talking about, is through the lens of producers, because we feel like producers play such a pivotal role in this work, right? Producers are often the people who are making not only creative decisions, but also hiring decisions, looking at what sort of advisors, who's involved in the project, how that story is going to be told, and then also sort of at the intersection between funders and investors, and some of the gatekeepers and festivals, and then also the creative teams that they're working with. So that's how we address this. DPA created a crediting out guideline last year to sort of explain what producers do, and then recently did a waterfall to explain how to equitably look at investment money coming into the documentary industry. Our committee also put together a resource guide, an anti-racist and structural equality resource guide, which I think Melody can probably link here, to hopefully again explain to filmmakers, one, why this is so important, why it's so important that we have better representation in our film teams, that we push ourselves and others to be accountable in this work. And then also some resources and links to opportunities for emerging producers and filmmakers, and links to some of the other collectives that have been doing so much of this work. I think one of the things that's been really interesting in listening to this conversation and seeing people is the DPA, I think, is largely made up of what would be considered social issue filmmakers. And I kind of laugh because, what isn't a social issue in particular? It's sort of a funny name, considering how so much of what's happening in our environment is definitely a social issue. But I'm really interested in trying to bridge some of the gaps between what I think is like a lot of the people here, and then also some of the producers that I work with. So again, I just want to say thank you for having us again. I think it's incumbent on all of us to work harder and do better and expand our networks, both professionally and socially, to make this work last. I think for too long, we've sort of nuanced our way out of making difficult decisions about privilege and power. And I think it's long overdue that we start holding ourselves to a higher standard in our storytelling and craft. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing that. I can't agree more with everything that you said. And I love the fact that you're looking at bringing the quote unquote social issue documentaries right into this space. I have been an evangelist to that crowd as well, to explore stories within science and natural history, because absolutely they are social issues, and everything that we talk about absolutely affect us on a social and global scale. So appreciate you doing that work, and I'd love to follow up with you with regards to that. So thanks everyone that has contributed so far to the conversation. I know we're going a little over, and I appreciate everyone that has been able to stay with us. Want to bring on Jared Lipworth, who is going to kind of wrap up the conversation for us, really on an even more positive note, to try to figure out, what are the next steps? What are the action items? What can we all do to continue this incredible momentum that we have today around this conversation and around this summit? And then really try to start thinking about next time we meet, hopefully in person, right, with the Tetons behind us, where will we be next year, and what we'll be able to say that we've done in the past year to get there. So Jarrett, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pam. From an Action Coalition perspective, this year was a lot about starting conversations, about taking stock of what organizations are already doing and planning, and building a more diverse and inclusive Jackson Wild community for this summit and beyond. If this session is any indication, we're off to a good start, and we're excited to see where we can go from here and how we can start putting programs in place, concrete programs that are not just individual institutions, but across our whole industry, that will help bring more diverse talent into our natural history, conservation, and science storytelling tent, and to create opportunities for newcomers to really dive in and gain actual production experience once they're here. We're hoping to build on the work that many of these organizations represented here are already doing, and create a powerful coalition of producers, broadcasters, and streamers who are committed to DNI on all their productions. And we're also really eager to create programs that provide actual opportunities for diverse voices who are eager to break into our community. We've got talent from incredibly diverse range of backgrounds being developed through programs like the Jackson Wild Media Labs, the Jackson Fellowships, the Noof Wild Women Labs, and many more, including, Faith was talking about the virtual Kenya program. She's the perfect example of someone who came up through the fellowship and is now building programs in Kenya to further the field. And we want to make sure that we're giving these immensely talented people every chance to succeed and to help transform our industry. So we're excited to dig in over the next year and to work with all of you to develop these programs and many others. And we hope that by next year this time, we'll be able to gather, hopefully in person, to assess and continue to expand on the programs we're just starting to put in place now.
So much, Jared. So you heard it, guys. This is really an invitation to continue the conversation. We have a little over 15 minutes if anybody wants to sideline and talk a little bit more, we're going to move over to the fireside chats. But again, thanks again for joining us for this conversation. Please take a look at all the incredible resources that have just come up from the chat while we've been together in the last little over an hour. And again, I would point you to the Google Doc that we have started as a group and with our collaborators with ideas. We welcome your ideas, and it is a live organic document that is going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to flesh it out. Huge thanks to HHMI Tangle Bank Studios for sponsoring this. And once again, thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the Fire Chat. Melanie, thank you so much for helping us run it. Have a good summit, everyone.